this video, we're going to go through CFAM Report 102, Expense 2. The expense reports 1 through 6 all do roughly the same thing, but give you a little more access or less access to the different pieces of the accounting string. For Expense 2, we'll naturally have 2 pieces that we can look at, and we'll go through just a general use case for maybe something you might use for that. Within CFAM, you have access to the 6 pieces of the accounting string: fund, source of fund, function, location, program, and object. The accounting manual also calls out source of fund groups, function groups, program groups, object groups, broad function groups, and broad object groups that are also accessible. Those are generally just ranges of numbers that usually have a similar purpose or are sometimes tracked together. Our initial report is blank because we don't have enough selected in our filters to have any data. So for this case, we're going to choose a school. We'll go to the very bottom and get Yellville Summit. As I click apply, you'll see that I'm getting fiscal years 19 through current 23. And the report right now is defaulted to fund in the expense column 1 and source of fund in expense column 2. That's the 2 parts of the accounting string. And we have everything that's in those. So we're seeing multiple years worth of teacher salaries and how those were broken out and where those came out of. As general rules, the bars show, in this report anyways, the expenditure amounts for that year. The red lines show a target, which was the budgeted amount, and then anything over that will be over budget. Our analysis column can change, but it's defaulted to budget balance and is determined by this flip here. So we can see how much off of budget over or under that expenditure line item was for that year. For today's purposes, let's simplify this down. Let's just look at current and prior year, click apply, and then let's actually change. Let's look at fund, that's fine, but let's change the second column to object. That's going to change the pieces I get in a filter. As you'll see, I have the expense column 1, which as set right now is fund, and expense column 2, which is as set, is object. We could also narrow down some things here. For today's use case, let's uncheck this, and let's look at activity funds and apply. The objects are now filtered down to just the objects that appeared within the activity funds. And we can see a breakout of a high-level activity fund piece and then a granular level of object, how that was expended versus what was budgeted. In this case, as most schools we've seen don't typically budget for activity funds, so we don't have a red target line. We don't really know necessarily what they're going to do with those, so we don't budget for it. But we can see year to year how we are comparing versus prior year in this current case versus where we are today. If you want to do a different use case, we could do operating still with objects. If we'll click the Scooby-Doo magnifying glass, we can search these objects to get just certain ones we want. Uncheck all, but add back in some technology items. So as I type tech, the object codes within the operating fund that have that word in there show up. 66500 is kind of general value technology supplies. 67340 would be fixed assets for those. So it gives us what we've narrowed it down to. I'm looking at traditional schools is what gave me these list of districts, but we could have chosen co-op, charters, or all and kind of hand-picked out of there. We're looking at prior and current fiscal year. And then I've got Fund 2 to look at operating expenditures of just a couple of technology objects that I've selected here. Fill in the blank with your use case here if you wanted to find electrical cost or natural gas or trash. Those items are all codes in that object filter that you could find, and you could see how that is being spent year to year. This has got us narrowed down to technology supplies. Yellville doesn't typically use that code, but technology hardware, they had $54,000 worth of expenditures coming in almost 16 grand under budget, which we like to see. And then they haven't done anything currently, but they've budgeted 93,000 and all that is remaining. So again, have to think through your use cases. What are you looking for? What do you want to see? We could actually add a fiscal year here to see if in 21 we did anything different. CFAM is also a good way to learn from your neighbors. You can see how if you wanted to see other districts similar size or across the state, you could kind of compare how they're spending. And you could do this for salaries, you could do this for benefits, and those sorts of things. It's been a brief overview of CFAM Report 102 Expense 2, and hopefully that gives you a little bit of an overview of how you could use just 2 columns to answer some questions.